Lawson family murders. Christmas Day, 1929, Germantown, North Carolina. Charles Davis Lawson, a 43-year-old tobacco farmer, had taken his wife Fanny and their 7 children into town days earlier to buy new clothes and family portraits, a Christmas treat for the kids. By late morning on December 25th, Charles had sent his oldest son Arthur on an errand, leaving only his wife and 6 children on the property. What happened next would leave the entire community in shock. Just past the tobacco barn, Charles spotted his 2 daughters, Carrie, 12, and Maybelle, 7. Without warning, he raised his shotgun and fired. The girls collapsed in the snow, the sound echoing across the quiet farmland. From there, he moved toward the house. His wife, Fanny, was on the porch preparing Christmas food when she heard the shot. Before she could react, Charles fired again, killing her instantly. Their daughter Marie, 17, screamed from inside the house. Charles entered, shot her at close range, then turned his gun on the younger boys, James, 4, and Raymond, 2, before finally ending the life of his youngest, baby Mary Lou, just 4 months old. The entire family was wiped out in minutes. When Arthur returned home, he discovered the unimaginable: his entire family dead. His mother and siblings lay with their arms folded across their bodies and rocks placed carefully under their heads, as if positioned for some final macabre ritual. By mid-afternoon, word spread that something terrible had happened at the Lawson farm. Neighbors arrived, discovering a silent house, Christmas decorations still hanging, presents unopened beneath the tree. But Charles was nowhere to be found. He had fled into the nearby woods. For hours, searchers combed the farmland until, just after dusk, a single gunshot echoed through the trees. When they reached the source, they found Charles's body lying beside 2 letters addressed to no one, his shotgun on the ground, and footprints pacing in circles, as if he had been debating his final decision for hours. The case horrified the state. Newspapers across the country ran the story. Crowds gathered outside the farmhouse for days, stunned by the scale and brutality of the killings. To this day, no one knows exactly why Charles Lawson murdered his family. Arthur became the sole surviving member of the Lawson family that Christmas Day. His uncle Marion later opened the family home as a tourist attraction, claiming he needed to raise money for Arthur to settle the farm's mortgage. The tragedy would haunt Arthur for the rest of his life. He eventually married and had 4 children of his own, attempting to rebuild what had been so brutally destroyed. But in 1945, at the age of 35, Arthur Lawson was killed in a motor vehicle accident, leaving behind his wife and 4 children, ending the last living connection to that terrible Christmas morning. Murder of the Goldmark family. Christmas Eve, 1985, Seattle, Washington. The Goldmark family, Charles, Annie, and their 2 sons, 12-year-old Derek and 10-year-old Colin, were well known in the community. Charles was a respected attorney. Annie was active in neighborhood organizations. They were a quiet family preparing for Christmas Eve at home. But for months, a local extremist named David Lewis Rice had been watching them. Rice was a troubled drifter immersed in far-right conspiracy theories. He had convinced himself, without evidence, that the Goldmarks were communists plotting to take over local government. His belief wasn't based on fact. It was built on rumors and propaganda from extremist groups. On Christmas Eve, he decided to act. Just after 7 p.m., Rice approached the Goldmark home carrying a briefcase containing rope, tape, and chemicals. He knocked on the door, pretending to deliver a Christmas package. When young Derek answered, Rice forced his way inside. He tied up the entire family in the living room. The boys were terrified. Annie tried calming them. Charles attempted to reason with Rice. None of it worked. Rice wasn't looking for money or revenge. He believed he was stopping a political enemy who didn't exist. After restraining them, Rice attacked the family one by one. He strangled Charles and Annie first, then turned to the boys. The violence was swift and deliberate, driven by twisted ideology. Before fleeing, he attempted to destroy evidence by setting small fires in the home, but the flames didn't spread. Hours later, a family friend arrived to check on them. What he discovered was a nightmare: a ransacked home, signs of a struggle, and the Goldmarks lying on the floor, barely alive. Emergency responders rushed the victims to the hospital, but it was too late for Charles and Annie. Derek and Colin fought for their lives, but both boys died shortly after. The murders shocked Seattle. Investigators quickly traced Rice back to the crime. He confessed in detail, explaining how extremist materials had convinced him the Goldmarks were dangerous communists. None of it was true. They were simply a normal family preparing for Christmas. Rice was convicted of aggravated murder, and the case became one of the most chilling examples of ideological violence in Washington state history. Covina Massacre, Christmas Eve, 2008, Covina, California. On a quiet neighborhood outside Los Angeles, the Ortega family was hosting their annual Christmas party. More than 20 relatives and friends filled the house, sharing food, opening presents, and celebrating together. Just before 11:30 p.m., the celebration ended in the most violent Christmas attack in modern California history. A man dressed in a full Santa Claus suit stepped out of a rental car carrying a large, gift-wrapped box. Neighbors waved, thinking he was late to the party. But inside the box was a homemade flamethrower, handguns, and ammunition. The man was Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, ex-husband of Sylvia Ortega, who was inside celebrating with her family. They had divorced months earlier after a bitter separation. Pardo had lost his job and his money. In the weeks before Christmas, he began planning something catastrophic. He walked to the front door, wearing the Santa mask, and knocked. When an 8-year-old girl ran to greet Santa, Pardo shot her in the face. Chaos erupted inside the house. Guests screamed and scattered as Pardo stepped through the doorway, firing at everyone he saw. 9 members of the Ortega family were shot and killed within moments. Others hid behind furniture, fled into bedrooms, or jumped from windows to escape. After the shootings, Pardo opened the gift-wrapped box and pulled out the flamethrower. He began spraying the house with high-pressure gasoline. Within seconds, the Ortega home erupted into flames. The fire burned so hot it melted parts of the structure and made identifying victims nearly impossible. By the early morning of December 25th, the house was nothing but a charred frame. Pardo fled in his rental car, but the flames had melted part of his Santa suit, fusing it to his skin. He was badly burned. 3 hours later, police found him dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound inside his brother's home in Sylmar. His car was parked nearby, with explosives rigged inside. Investigators discovered Pardo had planned the attack for weeks, buying weapons, creating the flamethrower, and crafting a fake Santa costume to get close without suspicion. Pope County Christmas Massacre, December 28, 1987, Russellville, Arkansas. Ronald Gene Simmons, a 47-year-old former Air Force sergeant, lived in isolation with his family on a rural property called Mockingbird Hill. For years, he controlled his wife and children through intimidation and violence. By Christmas 1987, tension inside the Simmons home had reached a breaking point. Days earlier, several of his children and grandchildren were returning to visit for the holiday, unaware that Ronald had already begun killing. On December 22nd, before anyone arrived, Simmons shot and killed his wife Rebecca, along with their eldest son Gene and his wife Billy, then strangled and drowned their 3-year-old granddaughter. He hid the bodies behind the house, in a pit. Then he waited. Over the next 2 days, the rest of the family arrived. On December 26th, his daughter Sheila, her husband, and their children walked through the door. Simmons killed each of them as they entered, one by one, with chilling calm. When his son William arrived shortly after, Simmons murdered him as well. By the end of the weekend, 14 members of the Simmons family were dead, the worst family killing in Arkansas history. But Simmons wasn't finished. After cleaning the house and covering the bodies with coats and barbed wire, he spent the next 2 days drinking beer, watching television, and sleeping in the same home where the victims still lay. Then, on December 28th, he left the house and drove into Russellville with a handgun. His first stop was a law office where he shot and killed Kathy Kendrick, a woman he'd been obsessed with. Minutes later, he entered an oil company and opened fire, killing one man and wounding another. He moved through town to a convenience store, then to another office, shooting and injuring more victims. Instead of fleeing, Simmons sat down in an office lobby and waited for police. When officers arrived, he handed over his gun without resistance. His spree had lasted less than an hour. The massacre shocked Arkansas and the entire country. Ronald Gene Simmons was convicted and later executed. His crimes remain one of the deadliest family massacres in U.S. history, and one of the most chilling tragedies ever to strike during the Christmas season. Tiede Family Cabin Killings, December 22, 1990. Oakley, Utah. Beaver Springs Mountains. A snow-covered cabin in the Beaver Springs Mountains served as a holiday retreat for the Tiede family, a place to escape the city and enjoy a quiet winter break. They never imagined it would become a crime scene. Earlier that day, 2 parolees, Von Lester Taylor and Edward Deli, broke into the cabin after walking away from a Salt Lake City halfway house. They hid inside the vacant property, waiting. One of them even called a friend and said he planned to shoot some people. Late that afternoon, members of the Tiede family began arriving. Kay Tiede, her mother Beth Potts, and her daughter Lene entered first. The intruders confronted them at gunpoint. Within moments, Taylor opened fire, killing Kay and Beth. Lene froze in horror. Soon after, Rolf Tiede, Kay's husband, arrived with their younger daughter Tricia. The men forced them inside at gunpoint, demanding money and threatening violence. Taylor shot Rolf in the face, leaving him severely wounded but alive. Before fleeing, the pair doused the cabin in fuel and set it on fire. They took Lene and Tricia hostage and escaped by snowmobile, then by car. But Rolf, bleeding and terrified, managed to escape the burning cabin and seek help. A massive search began immediately. Within hours, police caught Taylor and Deli during a high-speed chase. The 2 sisters were rescued alive. 2 murders, a shooting, a kidnapping, arson. A family destroyed, but 2 young women survived. In court, Taylor pleaded guilty to 2 counts of capital murder and was sentenced to death. Deli was convicted of murder and sentenced to life without parole. Celebrity Chef Christmas Day Murders, December 25, 2017, Phoenix, Arizona. Anthony Milan Ross, a vegan chef, author, and motivational speaker, a familiar face in Phoenix's health food scene, was supposed to hand off his 2 children to their mother, Iris Ross, as part of their custody arrangement. Just 24 hours earlier, Ross had posted a cheerful video on social media. In it, he stood beside his 11-year-old son Nigel, singing Christmas songs and wishing viewers a Merry Christmas. To thousands of followers, he appeared calm, smiling, even joyful. No one watching that video could have imagined what the next day would bring. Shortly after 2:45 p.m., Iris arrived at the apartment to pick up the kids. Neighbors later told police they heard raised voices outside the doorway, an argument that escalated in seconds. Then came gunshots. When officers arrived minutes later, they found Iris on the terrace, fatally wounded. Ross had retreated into the apartment with the children. A tense, hours-long standoff began. Police negotiators called out repeatedly, urging him to surrender. Instead, Ross fired at them through the window. Fearing the children were in immediate danger, tactical units deployed a robot into the apartment. Through the camera feed, officers discovered what they feared most: the bodies of Nigel, age 11, and his baby sister Honora, just 10 months old. Both had been shot. Ross remained barricaded inside, pacing back and forth, ignoring commands until police finally moved in. He was taken into custody without further gunfire, ending a confrontation that had lasted nearly 6 hours. The city was stunned. Ross had built a public image as a wellness expert and charismatic speaker who preached positivity. But behind the scenes, his life had been falling apart. Financial troubles, the collapse of his marriage, and mounting instability had all contributed to his downward spiral. Investigators later uncovered disturbing evidence: internet searches for weapons and violence, messages hinting that something big was coming on Christmas, and testimony describing his increasingly volatile state. Prosecutors argued the murders were premeditated, that Ross had decided if he couldn't keep his family, no one would. In 2025, after years of legal delays, a Maricopa County jury found him guilty of murdering Iris, Nigel, and Honora, along with aggravated assault for firing at police.